to your parents, to your grandparents, what messages did they give you about peace that prepared you to enter this moment, this position, this conversation?
That's a really interesting question. You know, my father left high school to enlist in World War II.
Okay.
And then went back to high school when he came back. And he, some people enlisted and they didn't get actively engaged or deployed. He did.
Where?
He was in the Asian theater, and he was a rear gunner on one of those bombardier planes that have like a 5-person crew, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they have a pilot and a bombardier and a rear gunner, and you know, I don't know, but you see him in movies. You see
Right.
those old, so the guy who sat down in the bubble at the
Mm-hmm.
back of the plane with the machine, that was his thing.
Yep.
And they flew dozens and dozens of missions, for lack of a, that's what they would call them.
That's what they called them,
right?
yeah.
They flew dozens and dozens. They even got very high-ranking medals for having had part of their engine blown out and choosing to go forward and continue rather than go back. So he brought back a unique experience that he never talked about. And I remember with my younger cousins, sometimes we would find these medals and things like that in a chest in my grandmother's attic. And then gradually we would eke pieces of the story out from my mother, and eventually when I was older he would talk to me a little bit about it. So I knew that that had affected him, and I knew that it had tempered him in some way, but it didn't fundamentally change. I mean, this was a generation that believed that that was the good war, and didn't fundamentally change that, but it certainly made him a lot more sober about these things, and he was one of those who didn't talk about it. But here's the interesting thing. I believe that he had PTSD.
Wow.
And I believe, in retrospect, that my entire generation was raised by a generation, most of which had PTSD, because that war mobilization was massive.
Yeah.
Both the effect at home, at the home front, and the hundreds of thousands or millions of primarily men that were sent over. And when I look back at the things we experienced as kids and teenagers in those years, and the things that I saw in the inexplicable behaviors I saw in my friends, and you know, some of the random violence and things like that. In retrospect, it's very clear to me that we were a PTSD nation, and that we were actually raised by a generation that had PTSD, and neither they nor we knew there was such a thing, knew what it meant, knew what was going on with them or us. So I think that that's affected me and my peers a lot.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Sharing that's really, really thought-provoking for me to think about.